internet is people who watch Netflix with subtitles are sort of ruining the action of the show. So the subtitles often play before the actual action happens, or sometimes a little bit before words are spoken. And so in a particular like scary or thrilling movie, you might see the words that say door slam before the door actually slams, and it sort of spoils the moment. I think what is interesting about this tweet is that sometimes people have subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing, which are structured very differently than subtitles for spoken content. Sometimes people have those on instead of the subtitles, and they confuse them because in actuality, you only get these pre-audio cues like a door slams or door opens when you have subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing turned on instead of spoken word subtitles. So there, again, this meme has sort of been going around the internet, but we see here that people don't actually understand which asset type they have turned on for Netflix. They can't make that distinction. And that's important for us to understand when we are trying to get people to use both type of subtitles and subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing on Netflix. So with the success of Parasite and other several quote unquote foreign language movies, I hesitate to use the word foreign language because that definitely orients English as the main language in the world, and I don't think that's true at all. But the success of movies that have English not as the main language of the movie, subtitles are entering the public consciousness and becoming much more important. I have been seeing debates all over all corners of the internet about whether people want to watch Parasite with subtitles. Actually, Hulu came out with a tweet recently that said, if you don't want to watch Parasite with subtitles, you're free to learn Korean. And there was quite an interesting sort of conversation going on in the comments there where people were like, subtitles take away from the experience. I don't want to have to read while I'm watching a movie. I'd much rather have dubs. And people are saying dubs obscure the natural timbre of the voice acting. So I'd much rather have subtitles. It's a debate going back and forward. But for us, for Netflix, providing access to content for all our members, regardless of what language they speak, is extremely important. So some of the big questions in this area for us are, what is the member experience of subtitles and where can we improve? I've included a screenshot on the right of the subtitle experience on Netflix, which essentially, one of the options is you go into the player and you're able to switch both your subtitles and audio, which is dubs on. And again, given that some people say subtitles ruin the experience for me, and some people say I'd much rather prefer dubs, making sure that people can find and enjoy these assets is very, very important to us. So the product approach can often be, let's just test a couple things. Test, test, test. Let's not dive too deeply into the needs. Let's just identify what we think are some hypotheses and go straight to test, because that's the fastest approach. And there was some talk about, what are the key elements that might affect the member experience of subtitles? Well, it's just about reading speed and translation quality, right? The argument there is that it's not just about reading speed and translation quality. There is much more to the subjective experience of subtitles. So part of my job as a researcher is to sort of reframe the approach from it's just about these technical elements to there's quite a lot of creative work that goes into subtitles and a lot more about the user experience that we need to understand. So I, in my research approach, was like, let's take a step back. Let's understand the consumer needs in this space. And I turned to this work that actually came out in SIG Access about understanding, the diverse needs of subtitle users. And so this paper really helped me outline a few different issues. So of course, speed and timing are important because I think that's table stakes for enjoying subtitles, meaning if the speed and timing are off, the user experience is so poor that we can't really get to any other aspects of it. But in addition to speed and timing, there's subtitle layout. So what is the color of the subtitles? How are they organized on the screen? For consumers, subtitles can be placed at the bottom. Sometimes they're placed at the top. When you see subtitles in films in the movie theater, they can be a variable placement. It's not 100% standard where they'll appear on the screen. And in some film festivals where there's multiple languages and subtitles needed, there can be double subtitles on top of each other. So the layout is very important to comprehending subtitles, and again, making sure that people have this experience where the subtitles fade away and they're able to just enjoy the content. Additionally to this, there are some issues with subtitles with lip movement matching the audio, matching the subtitles. So if there isn't a sort of concert in between when the audio comes, when people are talking with the audio, and where the subtitles come, there can be issues with the user experience. And again, as I said, placement within the video is huge. Is it at the bottom? Have we put a black bar on the back? What color is it? All of these things are very important. So this work pointed to giving subtitles users more control as a possible solution. So it suggested giving people control over where the subtitles appear, giving people some control over color options, and also giving people control over the speed and timing to accommodate for different reading speeds. So thinking about the various consumer needs, we needed to move on to understanding how we evaluate what we currently have. And I was looking around for work on how to evaluate the user experience of subtitles, and I came across this work from the BBC, who developed a framework around understanding the UX of subtitles. So this framework really captured a few key aspects of the subjective experience. So they pointed out aesthetics, attention, involvement. And as I'm reading this, it's starting to look very, very familiar for me, and hopefully it looks very familiar to you. They're almost the same principles as user engagement. So the attention, the perceived usability, all of these aspects that are inherent into user engagement were also being applied here to measure the experience, subjective experience of subtitles. So I incorporated this framework by designing research that really, again, focused on this user engagement. So how did I do this? We started off with a phase that looked at user engagement under different conditions. So when people are watching together versus solo watching, what is their experience of subtitles? How easy is it to, one, discover the language options, and then two, decide on a language to watch if you're in a multilingual household watching together? Often in countries, some of the research that I've done in Europe has uncovered that often there are several languages spoken in a household. So for example, with members in Hungary, they can speak Hungarian, German, Italian, Spanish, especially people have worked abroad and then come back home. And so when deciding what language they're going to watch on, that is an important decision. It often comes down to what is the most common language spoken in the house, or how many people speak a language, or can we turn on dubs in Hungarian and maybe have subs in German? It's a very complicated decision. Additionally, if you have folks watching who perhaps read at different speeds and are watching together, the engagement can be very different across those two people with their ability to sort of keep up with the subtitles. The second thing that I incorporated in my research program was really leveraging the first work that I talked about and understanding the impact of stylistic elements of subtitles. So variations in size, in color, and font. There are, of course, international standards set out for subtitles. So there is quite a limited framework in which we can modify things. Thankfully, these are accessibility standards that have been set, so we have them to lean on. But within those, within that framework, can we vary things and understand, one, if there are variations that work for a majority of users, and two, if we give people control over them, how does that impact the experience? And then the third is, of course, incorporating a global perspective. A lot of people who are using subtitles, of course, are non-native English speakers, since entertainment, I think, can at times be dominated by English. We definitely want to understand in all of our key markets, so that's in Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, in Asia and the Pacific Islands, in Latin America, to understand what the difference is in the experience in all of those markets. The third thing was, of course, to include people who use subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing. So people who are hearing impaired or are deaf, and understand, are they able to find those specific types of subtitles? Or are they sort of getting stuck using subtitles that match the audio, or that match the spoken word exclusively? I can't speak at length about the outcomes of this work, but I will say that I leaned heavily on academic work for the execution of this, and it really helped make my study and understanding of subtitles much more comprehensive. We were able to implement solutions that I think were much more nuanced and less focused again on the technical aspects like reading speed and timing, because we ended up leaning on some of this academic work. So the second case study I'm going to talk about is a connective experiences work that we wanted to do at Netflix. And this is a little bit different from the subtitle work in that it was much less technical, much less focused on we're improving this one aspect. And much more focused on how can we build something really broad and amorphous. So I think it was an even sort of more fertile ground for using academic research, and that we were starting off really at just the conceptual level. So we wanted to develop an experience that encourages sharing and creates nostalgia among members. I've included this rotary telephone, this Coca-Cola bottle as examples of nostalgia, examples of things that were from a long time ago. And this is the idea that we started off with. We want to encourage sharing, we want to create nostalgia. But we really didn't know where else to go after that. So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel and copy other fantastic projects like Spotify or YouTube's Year in Review. Spotify's Wrapped product has enjoyed extreme success. It's really great, but we wanted to create an experience that felt wholly Netflix. So we decided, let's get back to the basics. What are the different parts of the experience? So we want people to feel nostalgic. Some of this nostalgia might involve behaviors on Netflix. So it involves the quantified self, which I'll talk about and explain in a little bit more detail later. And we wanted people to share. So as a researcher, it was my job to sort of unpack what is essential to each of these. How can we deepen our understanding of these concepts so then we can take our understanding and build this into a product later on. So I started with the seminal paper on nostalgia, which is about the content of nostalgia, what triggers it, how does it function. It's from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. And this work gave us several key concepts. One, nostalgia is driven by curiosity. And to create nostalgia, we need stimuli that requires low cognitive effort, but is still high on emotional appeal and resonance. And how we do this is we have a concept that connects a past moment with a present one, but it must be recent enough to sort of create this emotional appeal in order for nostalgia to happen. I included this Kobe radio because this is a particularly nostalgic object for me. As a child, after school, when I was doing my homework, I used to like to tape songs off of the radio. And this particular device is both a radio and a cassette recorder. I think you'd be hard pressed now to find people who use tape. But it's nostalgic for me because it's high in emotional appeal. You know, this was something that I listened to while I was completing my homework after school every day. It's recent enough that I can still remember it and connect, you know, this past moment to now, where I listen to podcasts in my car with my Apple CarPlay, which of course is a wholly different experience. They're definitely recorded. I can always come back to them. I don't have to, you know, wait for a particular song to come on the radio to record with my tape, but it connects, there's some connection between these past moments and present ones. So thinking about nostalgia and curiosity led us to literature on information gap and models of information seeking. And I have to admit, my training in information science definitely gave me a little bit of bias here, because I knew this work existed and I sort of went directly to it. So things like Lowenstein's information gap, the seminal paper Savalinen's Everyday Life Information Seeking, Nalam Bilal's Information and Emotion, which, you know, I was introduced to as part of my dissertation work on stress and information interactions, and Chatterjee's model of uncertainty and information seeking. These were all papers that really sort of helped me conceptualize, for people who are unfamiliar with this space, i.e. people who work in product, designers, what models of information seeking were. And so all of the literature pointed to people becoming aware of a gap in their knowledge and by encountering new, inconsistent, or ambiguous stimuli. So I included this screenshot here from it's a game company that I sometimes purchase games for, and they often put this like summer mystery bundle. So when I look at this, I realize, hey, I don't know, this is a sort of new stimuli to me. I don't know what the summer mystery bundle is, and it's a gap in my knowledge. So I'm motivated to try to resolve this gap. Additionally, people attempt to bridge this gap through information seeking. Again, this community should be very familiar with these information seeking models, but this is how I packaged it up for folks who are not academics and who are not familiar with this information literature. So we know that people move from a state of having less knowledge to more knowledge, and the thing that connects these two is information seeking. So motivation to close the gap between less knowledge and more knowledge increases if the information has emotional appeal. Again, as I said, with the example of the radio, that has emotional appeal for me because it's something that was a big part of my both my schoolwork and my sort of after school downtime experience. But this really helps us tie into nostalgia, which emotional appeal is also critical to, by giving us this hinge here of the emotional appeal. It's important to information seeking. People sort of, I'm sorry, let me back up a little bit. People are more motivated to seek information when there's emotional appeal, and nostalgia is created by having emotional appeal. So again, identifying that emotional appeal is critical to these two concepts was very useful here. Lastly, we talked a little bit about the quantified self and sharing. So to understand both of these things, we look to some work on online social networks, why we disclose, because we were sort of thinking maybe this would be a sharing concept on social. This might be in the app, we weren't really sure. And then Deborah Lupton's written a book on quantified self. And so to define quantified self, I turned to this book, and this term had been thrown around at work a little bit, but we really didn't understand what it meant. And so it's the concept of self-tracking with technology, and among those who share an interest in self-knowledge through numbers. The critical piece here is self-knowledge. So to combine sort of this understanding of quantified self, it's people are motivated to seek information about themselves as part of quantified self for greater insight and understanding. You know, how do I tick? You know, what are my sleep patterns like? What's my fitness like? We're all familiar with fitness trackers. Now it seems like there's quite a few trackers for different behaviors or different things that we want to track. So quantified self has become kind of permeated throughout our daily lives. And curiosity about yourself, of course, again, strongly related, rooted in emotional appeal. And people want to share about themselves. So people share these sort of quantified metrics about themselves with others as a means of creating connection. So based on the literature about nostalgia, about curiosity, about the quantified self and sharing, we hit on these three things that we needed for our product to work. So we needed a concept that connects a past moment with a present one, but it has to be recent enough to have emotional appeal. We also needed stimuli that requires low cognitive effort, but is still high on emotional appeal and resonance so that people are motivated to seek out this information. We also need a moment that lets people share their identity and connect with others as well as themselves. So again, without this academic literature and sort of unpacking these concepts as they've been discussed in the literature, I think we would have sort of had to go with definitions that were based on a hunch or based on intuition and not really based on what have academics and other people who are familiar with this area, have spent a lifetime studying this area, what are they sort of recommending or what are they saying is critical to these concepts? So the way I incorporated this into my research design was by diagramming nostalgic experiences in real life and understanding their emotional appeal. So actually, this was a really fun project in that we started going to following participants to really high emotionally appealing and nostalgic experiences. We had people sort of walk us through a recent experience that they had and then tell us about an upcoming experience. And we interviewed them shortly after they had it. So we were going to people's houses after they had a graduation and going to the graduation party and talking about, tell me about the emotional appeal of this moment. Tell me about the nostalgia you're having in this moment. We also talked to them about their memorable daily life events. We had people come in and walk us through their photo albums, talk to us generally again about moments that they were nostalgic for. So I think having that nostalgia literature and then sort of going in it from this very high level was really important. After this, we started testing the emotional resonance of different quantified self aspects of Netflix. So things like having people know that they watched, so many hours of Netflix probably is a good quantified self aspect, but doesn't have a lot of emotional resonance, at least in a positive way. If you can imagine, people don't necessarily want to know how much time they spent in front of the television last year. So we wanted to think about what are other moments that might have positive emotional resonance about people's behavior on Netflix. The third thing was we wanted to investigate, again, since emotional appeal is so important, what consumers' emotional relationship to Netflix was. So what is their relationship? If Netflix were a person, what is their relationship with it? Are they friends with it? What is that friendship like? How much trust do they have in us? What sort of concept, about their experience on Netflix really grabs them in, creates strong, emotional experiences with them. What experiences have they had watching Netflix with other people, watching Netflix by themselves, with content they've discovered? So we really dove deep into that. And again, this work is still underway, but the first phase of it, the research phase, has been completed. And again, I leaned heavily, as I said, on academic literature to really inform my research design here. So in summary, I don't know if this point necessarily needs explaining, but academic research, of course, can give us a very sturdy foundation to lean on for product innovation. As I've shown in the case studies that I've outlined, the academic research was key and integral into giving us a solid basis from which to expand into more product thinking and product hypotheses. Both academic and industry research are enriched by cross-pollination. So there is a lot that we can sort of offer each other. And I think people who have straddled the line both are sort of the most equipped to leverage each side in figuring out how can we collaborate, how can we sort of inform each other a little bit more. And yeah, this is something that I'm thinking about a lot these days, is like, how can we find more ways to collaborate across academic and industry lines. At Instagram, I had quite a bit of collaboration with professors from Stanford around concepts like fun and what's important to teenagers, and really getting again at some of these high level things. But I think there's even sort of more, the boundaries are limitless in this case. As I said, we have a lot to sort of cross-pollinate with each other. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm sorry I didn't take questions during, but I'm happy to take them now. And yeah, thank you for your time and attention.
Yeah, great. So thank you, Ashley. Very interesting, two very interesting case studies. So as you mentioned, yeah, we'll be happy to take in questions. So we have a couple now on the Q&A. So yeah, we have a raised hand here. So let me just promote Yuan to panelists, and maybe he can share the microphone and ask directly his question. So Juan, you're probably now able to.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is, you said that there's no need to be adversarial about the academy or industry, yeah? But then I wonder, you are working in the industry, right? You cannot like jump from industry to an academia and back, or you can?
I don't, so I wouldn't say you can't. I think that you can sometimes. So for a good example, while I was working at Facebook, and I don't know if he's in this chat, but Charlie Clark did a sort of stint at Facebook, and he's a very well-known academic. I think he would be a fantastic person to talk to about going back and forth, because he spent a little bit of time at Facebook and then went back to the University of Waterloo. And so I think it is possible to do these sort of residencies at industry or in academia. I think we would probably have to work on developing those models more thoroughly, because at least in my personal experience, I haven't seen a ton of examples like this. There are a few here and there, but I don't think we have a sort of programmatic way of approaching it. But I do think, it would be useful if we started thinking more about how to, take some, even for short stints, some embedding of the sort of various sides within each other's world, because I think that could only create sort of more a more fertile environment for research, better research outcomes on both ends. So I know nowadays you can't just go back and forth. And clearly, when you choose a career path, you're likely to sort of pick one and stick with it for a while. But I think there may be a model of short-term engagement that could be very useful in that case. Does that help answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah. I was a bit disappointed because I thought that you pull it off.
Well, so this is something that I would love to do personally, and that I've been talking about at Netflix. Sort of bring in someone from academia to, like, again, have a residence with us, or for one of us at Netflix to maybe go and have, again, a residence at a local university, and sort of get these, get this cross-pollination going. I don't have a model yet for how that should work, but
and it's so hard to take people out of academia because they are losing time in their own career in academia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very challenging problem. I mean, I don't claim to have sort of all the answers on this, but I do think it's worth thinking about more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So so Andrew McFarlane, he had a question on the Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
He's now a panelist as well. So I guess, Andrew, you can open your mic as well.
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you, Ashley. That was a very, very interesting and engaging talk. When you were talking about subtitles, and I have a shared interest in terms of impairments as well, by the way. I'm very interested in that area, particularly in terms of information retrieval. One thing that struck me was that it's very much that the whole point about producing a bit of content is it's a creative process, and the screenwriter and director have done things, slamming a door or people talking with each other to create tension, to basically convey something about the characters and the storyline. Now, when you're when you're creating the subtitles, you're effectively trying to mirror that in some way, okay? And an extra complexity is that obviously when somebody who's creating the content, they didn't necessarily think about people with impairments, they were just thinking about the story and the way to convey it. So there's a creative process in which there's a creative process for producing the subtitles, and my question is, to what extent does the creator, does the director or anybody involved in creative process help you in producing the subtitles? So it's a very long question, but.
Mm-hmm. So it definitely is a sort of collaboration, at least up front. We have teams that work closely with creatives, so directors, producers, etc., to understand what their vision is for the subtitles for a film or a series. So we have ongoing conversations, as in, this film will be available in X number of languages. Let's talk about, what you hope the subtitle experience will be like. And that gets fed back to us in the creative process. We're much more handling a lot of the technical aspects. So linguists who translate it, how it appears on screen, the timing, all of that, but we work with them to really execute on their creative vision of how the subtitles look like, of course, keeping within international standards. Because even for sort of subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing subtitles, there are international standards that we do need to adhere to. So we work with them to work within that framework. The creative process, extends, I think, beyond directors and producers, even to linguists, because a lot of translation is very creative. There's a process called transcreation that we do, which is not direct translation of, the word dog from English goes into French, but really about conveying the meaning. And so that is a very also creative and time-consuming process in that we need to audit, have we effectively captured the meaning from the original language, whether it's English, Spanish, or French, into all of these other languages. It's quite delicate, especially in languages that are, for subtitles that are character-based, so a lot of Asian languages, we have to be especially careful there that we're really conveying the meaning. So I'd say, it is quite an involved process. We work directly with creatives, directors, and producers to execute on their vision, but we also have some creative control on our end as we work with linguists and other folks who do the actual translation. So we definitely take it into account. For subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing, we have, as I said, much less room to operate since the standards are quite strict there for accessibility reasons. And I think that makes a lot of sense. So it's quite standardized, around the world. So in that sense, I think the director, producer, those folks have much less input in that arena in particular, because again, there are much stricter standards that we need to follow. But we do try to execute on their subtitle vision cohesively. So regardless of which subtitle type it is. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. So we still have another question, Gautam Sahi. So yeah, I think you can turn on your microphone now. And
yeah, thank you very much for the nice presentation. It was really wonderful to know about the Netflix.
Thank
so
you.
You talk about the emotion and the information and behavior seeking. So I was wondering, when you have an account, when a user have an account with the Netflix, so do you use the user social media? If it's after getting the permission or without the permission, do you use the user social media account to see about the user's emotion or the user's personality, either for the recommendation of movie or any internal algorithm design?
We don't do that actually. Everything that you do outside of, so when we do research, we might talk to them about their social media behaviors, but that doesn't factor into any of our inputs when we are making product decisions. When anything is happening with regards to recommendations and such on Netflix, that is all based on your behavior with Netflix, your interaction with Netflix. When we're thinking about people's emotional state and sort of what they're thinking or feeling while they're watching Netflix, that's a research question. And we may talk to them about their social media, but we don't track it. We usually just ask them to give us the broad strokes because we want to respect their privacy as well. And that goes into helping us understand some of the context that people are in when they're watching Netflix, but it does not really go into any kind of inputs when we make recommendations to them. It's much more about us understanding their perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I actually also have a comment of my own. So in your talk, you actually presented 2 case studies that were very successful in terms of using the existing literature in order to inform product development, right? So do you have, let's say, examples where something like this hasn't been as successful, and for instance, a more data-driven approach is preferable? Or are there, let's say, resistances in some companies to use methodologies such as this, and instead there's an argument or there's a preference for doing things much more based on large user studies, testing, and A/B experiments and things like this, instead of looking at things from the literature and from the existing body of knowledge?
Yeah, I face this all the time. I as a product and metrics driven company, as most industry companies are, our natural reliance is like, what does the data say? I'd say even in these cases, once I've done the research and again, motivated some of the product development, it's still like, okay, it's down to how many people use it. It's down to if we're seeing the behavior that we want to see, if we're seeing increases where we want to see increases. And so I think what my job is to sort of position research as this is what we need to do to get it right, like right off. This is what we need to do to really create the sort of best possible product to then iterate on, so we don't have to start all over again, after we've tested into 4 or 5 solutions that don't work. But I would say I do get quite a bit of pushback from folks. So projects that I've done where I get pushback is usually, again, similar to these, where I do a lot of qualitative work and it's on a smaller population. So if I am talking to, maybe 15 or 20 people around the world in various markets, people say, I need, 1,000 responses per country on a survey in order to believe what you're saying. And so, that's part, I think, of the beauty of being a mixed methods researcher, is that I use qualitative work to get a sense of what the needs might be. And then I usually size them via survey. So ultimately, I'm including some data in there as well, because that's what, you meet people where they are. You meet data scientists and product managers where they are. And if data is the language that they speak, like sort of numbers are the language that they speak, then you bring them numbers. But I explained to them that it's very important to incorporate some of this qualitative feedback in the beginning, because we could just run with the numbers and have no idea why we're getting behavior that we're getting. I won't be too specific about the actual feature of this, but we have launched in companies that I've worked at in the past features where we see a high click-through rate, and we're like, oh, the product is working. But we see high click-through, much low engagement. People are like, why are they clicking on it but not engaging? And the reality is they're just dismissing the box, but we won't know that unless we ask people about it. So I caution people not to over-rely on metrics, because there is still something to be gained from understanding the underlying behavior. But yeah, of course, I feel a lot of pressure at times to provide, high sample sizes, large data sets, and often we can do that, but we got to start from somewhere else, because behavior may be being obscured with survey data if we don't understand why people are doing things in the first place.
And from your experience in the area, you believe that this probably is also a great way to save, both money and time, right? Because these large-scale experiments often also lead to nothing. So doing things more informed on existing literature, you believe that's a way also of, it also has benefits in terms of saving time and money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has its benefits. I do see, it has its drawbacks in terms of speed, because it's much easier, it's much faster to launch a large scale experiment and just wait for the data to come back. But it's sort of like, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, not to use that idiom. I realize now, especially working across with other people around the globe, that my speech is quite idiom ridden and I'm trying to get rid of it. But if we spend some of this time up front, because qualitative research does take time to put together and do, more time than to run a large scale experiment, it'll save us time down the road from going back and being, that didn't work. What should we change exactly? So yeah, I think that is a strong argument for doing background literature reviews, qualitative research, other type of research up front before moving straight into an experiment. And yeah, experiments can be variable. Sometimes things are flat and we're like, we have no idea why, or they send, key metrics down and we don't know why. So it's important to understand the why.
So you mentioned that these types of methods and doing research like this takes a lot of time. What about people? I mean, do you usually require large teams as well to develop things like this? Or no, there are a couple of, let's say, key scientists, key people guiding research this way and through these more informed methodology that, so besides time, do you also need additional researchers and more qualified people in order to do things like this, or not?
I'd say that, so in general at Netflix, our research team is quite lean. So it's usually like a couple of key people really leading the research. The areas that I mentioned, I lead the research there, and I may lean on people for help with some of the more technical aspects. So if I need a survey programmed or I need sample pulled, I will lean on someone else to do that, an operations person to do that, but I'll write the survey myself. If I need help with, recruiting people, or I need help with translation because we're speaking to people in a country whose language I don't speak, that will get people to help us with that, but we'll have the initial research plan, all of the questions, all of that. So I'd say that for me, it's working best when there's one person who's the principal and you do have additional resources to help on some of the technical aspects, but driving the research strategy, the ideas, and a lot of the methodology, having that owned by one person is working well for us and works well for me.
Okay, so thank you a lot. It was actually very, very interesting. Yeah, I'm just going to see if other attendees in the room have additional questions. If you do, just raise your hands or leave your comments on the Zoom chat window. People are clapping, right? So you can't hear. So that's the thing about these virtual conferences. You don't really hear the claps. But yeah, anyway, it was really, really interesting. Thank you. So I guess this concludes the third session for the ECIR Industry Day. In terms of the program, we still have a closing ceremony starting at 5 p.m. Okay, so people are invited to join, and I think they're planning to take a group Zoom photo, okay, in the closing ceremony as well. So yeah, thanks again. Hope you enjoyed the program. Thank you, Ashley. And well, be seeing you. Hope you enjoyed the conference. Okay, so
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks for your attention and thanks for your kind comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.